All right. Bitcoin Treasuries Digital Conference continues with the one, the only, Pete Rizzo. Pete, welcome. How are you, sir?
The marathon continues for you, huh? This is leg one, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen you since yesterday.
Well, always great to be here making my debut on the live stream. So appreciate everybody who's tuning in.
Absolutely. What is the latest and greatest? For those that haven't maybe seen the press release, you are now the president of BitcoinTreasuries.net. Can you walk us through what BitcoinTreasuries.net is, how it started, and what your kind of vision is moving forward?
Yeah, BitcoinTreasuries.net. I'm sure you know it. You've got it bookmarked. It's essentially the homepage of the Bitcoin Treasuries movement. If you've seen the leaderboards that are coming out from, Michael Saylor, Simon Jarovich, tweeting their position on the top 10 of the, Bitcoin Treasury rankings, that's BitcoinTreasuries.net. That's the website. Joining there, really a month ago now, just to help build and scale really what I think could be the most exciting kind of new Bitcoin media company in the space, right? I think we've kind of seen this Bitcoin Treasury movement grow from being a very grassroots kind of phenomenon to building a real community that's much different than other Bitcoin communities, right? So my background, for people who don't know, I'm sure a lot of people know me from Twitter. I've been in the Bitcoin media space since 2013. Was early at CoinDesk on the founding team over there, helped grow and scale that. Back when, cryptocurrencies were new and niche. And, I like to think of us as a global, local platform, right? It was for a small group of people, but we're connecting globally over, building startups and figuring out what the opportunity of Bitcoin was, right? Flash forward to 2020, I left CoinDesk, got really interested in this kind of early Bitcoin only movement, right? There was some part of the kind of overall crypto culture that was separating, like it didn't really want to be associated with alternative cryptocurrencies that had kind of felt like it had come and gone. It had left some consumers worse off. And so there was this new kind of idea, right, that you would have a thesis-based Bitcoin publication that, had a express editorial view. Was excited to join that and grow that company. And really with Bitcoin Treasuries, I feel like, it's a similar occurrence where, you have a group of people who are super passionate about what they're doing, right? Having Bitcoin infiltrate the global capital markets. Super interesting story, but, they're not, really finding a home in other places. It's not a topical area that a lot of the other major crypto media really, care that much about. For the most part, it's been dismissed kind of as a fad. You're not seeing real serious coverage of the space. And to me, that was an opportunity. Bitcoin Treasuries.net, obviously the leading data provider, but really a place where, stories are already breaking in the Bitcoin space, right? So today we're going to see Nakamoto, David Bailey's company, come out and make a $760 million buy. And I think, the first stop for people once they make that announcement is going to be on BitcoinTreasuries.net to see where on the leaderboard they fall. We can get into the, how to track and follow that, with the website. But I think a major story for today will be, when this buy is completed, Nakamoto won't be in the top 10, right? So $700 million smash buy of Bitcoin, not good enough to be in the top 10 on BitcoinTreasuries.net. But that's a story that'll be happening in real time on the website. So, my passion is media, it's storytelling, and I think BitcoinTreasuries.net is where that's happening right now.
Absolutely. Any upcoming events or things that you're focused on that you may want to cover while we have a few minutes here today together, or anything else that's important to cover?
Sure. Yeah, we announced today Preston Pish coming on as an advisor. If you go to the homepage, go to the blog, you'll see some new product updates there. Obviously, Preston, a legend in the space, has his podcast. Really going to be coming on to help deepen our data analytics. I'm sure there's a lot of people out in the audience who, want to get a better idea of how to compare these different companies. They're using kind of the homebrewed spreadsheet model, tracking their own metrics and portfolios. We're going to start incorporating a lot of that into the site. But yeah, we want to hear from you if that's what you're doing, right? If you're trading Bitcoin Treasury company equities, if you're looking to make these evaluations, if you're coming up with new metrics, we want to be a home for conversation around that as we build out the product. But yeah, obviously, we've got the events page now linking to the NYC Unconference. Happy to support you guys on that. Really, I think we want to be a venue for the discussion that's happening around this. And as I said, the news, right? So we'll see where Nakamoto falls on the leaderboard today. It's not good enough for the top 10, but maybe a top 15 entry, right? So I think people will be following that. And I think that's the exciting thing about the leaderboard, right? It's a story in real time.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was first kind of getting my arms around everything from a search results standpoint. And correct me if I'm wrong, but anytime that somebody kind of goes to Google and puts in Microstrategy or anything kind of related to Bitcoin Treasuries, BitcoinTreasuries.net's probably within the first 5, 6, 10 sort of search results, maybe higher. I don't know.
Yeah, for about 90% of the companies were first page search results. Obviously, some of the bigger ones like Tesla, best of luck with that. But yeah, right. People are, this is what I said, new user behavior kind of comes to market, right? People are looking to compare Bitcoin Treasury companies, find alternatives to MicroStrategy in their local jurisdiction. That source traffic is really coming to BitcoinTreasuries.net because, again, people are coming here because there's questions that they have that are not getting served elsewhere. And so, yeah, there'll be a new entry for Nakamoto today, but people can also, do evaluations and look at our historical data set. I was just on Roxham TV talking with their host, Nolan Bowerly. His big story of the day was, sort of the decline on the leaderboard of Block, right? So this is Jack Dorsey's company that we know and love. Going to do some announcements later this week that are quite big, launching their own ASIC. But the story of Block, as told on BitcoinTreasuries.net, is one of them kind of falling down this leaderboard, right? Maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, they're comfortably in the top 10 in terms of, the amount of Bitcoin that they own. Now they've kind of drifted, right? Falling out of the top 10, probably will stay above Nakamoto, but Coinbase, moving in front of them. So, we're seeing the effects of companies that are great Bitcoin companies, but if you're not using Bitcoin as the hurdle rate, if you're not using Bitcoin as the money, the story of Block is one of, our shareholders really getting the best value from Block's Bitcoin strategy. The BitcoinTreasuries.net, website would tell you probably no. So I think those are the stories that we can kind of unlock and start telling and unpacking that I'm pretty excited about.
What do you think is a feature on BitcoinTreasuries.net that people underappreciate or they may not even know exists? Can you kind of walk us through everything that's on there?
Sure. Yeah. There's a ton of ways to meet different parts of the ecosystem, right? So we launched a directories page that's pretty fresh and new. So if you're a services business, you want to attract Bitcoin Treasury companies who are coming to look at this leaderboard, you can list on that. Starting to talk to partners about, how we can help them with different launch products and things like that. Very early in those discussions. I think also if you have the logged in experience, some people see the main sort of top rankings. But if you go down to the, full kind of list of all the Bitcoin companies, you'll see part of it is gated. If you, are so kind as to give us your information, you'll find an even deeper suite of analytics. You can rank the companies by Bitcoin per share, MNAV, other features. That's what Preston is going to come, on board to help work with us on, which is essentially, what are the long tail metrics that we want to track? It's a big expansion. We track 250 companies. So, if we have to calculate the MNAV for 250 companies, we have to calculate the forward MNAV for 250 companies. It's a big lift, right? So we really want to get to the meat of, which of these new metrics are actually providing value. And then, farther down the road, I think you'll see that kind of break off and see the experience kind of bifurcate where, there'll be coin market cap on the front end, and on the back end, you'll get something that looks like a deeper analytics product suite. And those are conversations we'd love to have if people are using the site for that. But so products, the directory, you've got the advanced analytics, and we just launched a newsletter. So, if you're looking to keep up with these stories, I mentioned the Nakamoto debut covered in our Monday newsletter. We had the Block one, which I just mentioned, will be covered on Friday. But again, a lot of stories, right? I mean, Bitcoin has come to the capital markets. There's more beyond strategy. And if you kind of want to catch up to what's going on, I think we're a good resource. So.
What's the best way for people to reach out to you? Is there a contact us button on BitcoinTreasuries.net? Should they go to your X profile? Where should they bombard you?
Well, office@bitcointreasuries.net is the kind of our general email. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I'm there pretty religiously. So if you want to give me a DM, always happy to chat. And if you're a company in the space, looking to find out how you can kind of leverage what, kind of the product we built in the audience, you would love to stay in touch. And, if you're just following the stories, as I said, I think, there'll be more stories, and I'm excited for September, right? We talk about, Bitcoin at all-time highs in August right now. This is traditionally the part of the year where, even if people remember as far back as 2017, 2021, August is pretty slow. People are waiting to come back and lock in for September, for Q3 and Q4. We're not seeing that, right? So I think it's buckle up time, because I really do think we're going to see a pretty active second half of the year. I expect a lot of movements on the Bitcoin Treasury leaderboard. We saw some new entrants kind of make big splashes. Maybe they'll start fading down. We saw today MetaPlanet flipped Trump Media. So I love that. David Goliath, right? Trump comes in with a huge buy, estimated around, I think it's around 18,000 Bitcoin, right? Ends in the top 5, flipped by just the slow, steady accumulation of a company that has great product market fit. In a market where Bitcoin access, just isn't prudent, or it doesn't make sense for a lot of people financially. So, as I said, there's stories happening in real time, and I think one of the things that we can do a good job of is helping surface these just for our audience and then other audiences, right? Because I think a lot of these stories are just getting missed by the crypto mainstream.
Absolutely. If you have a few minutes, I would love for you to join me in chatting with Stephen Lubka, who is backstage right now.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, we're all eager to hear where he lands on the leaderboard today, right? With Nakamoto's debut.
Absolutely. Let's welcome Stephen Lubka to the stage, the Vice President of Investor Relations at Nakamoto. Stephen, good morning.
What's up? How are you guys? Happy to be here.
Oh, it's getting pretty exciting. We're 6.5 hours in, 58,000 people on the live stream, and everybody's talking about Nakamoto. So welcome.
How much coffee have you had? You've been doing this since 5 a.m.
So there's a couple coffee cups off to the side to be transparent, but right now there's blue Gatorade in the cup. So trying to, safety first.
Not orange, Tim. You should have done orange.
There's orange soda in the refrigerator for later.
There you go.
Coffee gets you up, but it's the Gatorade that gets you through, right? Steven, how's it going?
What's up? How are you, man? Pete, good to see you.
Yeah, I was just talking, and I think the segue here was, I was saying how BitcoinTreasuries.net, we're eagerly awaiting the debut of Nakamoto today, where it enters the leaderboard. I'm predicting that we might fall outside the top 10, but maybe I was hoping you'd give us a little bit more of a bullish take on that. Where are we debuting?
I'm excited too. So we are unfortunately dealing with the fun world of publicly traded equities and MMPI. And so I can't share anything about that beyond what David's already said. But suffice it to say, we are also very excited. And the vast majority of that money we raised is we're just buying Bitcoin with it. So it should be a decent number and put us at a good spot. But most of all, we get to start operating. And that's the exciting part.
All right. Well, I'll be looking forward to the debut. I'll be tweeting it, whenever we get there, and the slow ascent, right, as you guys climb up. It's getting cutthroat to get in the top 10 these days.
It's a race. It is a race. That's something I keep talking about with investors and analysts and investment banks, is just that I think we're still early to this. I really do. But it's going to be a race for Bitcoin. And, early Bitcoiners predicted that this was always going to be the case. It was eventually we'd hit this point. And I think it's here.
Stephen, are you familiar with a website called BitcoinTreasuries.net?
Of course I am. Who isn't? I actually pulled it up. I had I think my most recent podcast that's out was with Walker, and we actually went through the Bitcoin Treasuries website, because one of the things I wanted to point out, and I had a tweet about this, is that if you actually take the proper treasury companies, and all I mean that is not that they have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, but that they're just a company that all they do is accumulate Bitcoin, or even just that they're running that playbook. and you add up all the purchases in the top 60, you get a number that's less than what the Galaxy sellers sold a few weeks ago. And this is bullish to me because everyone wants to be like, oh, well, what if what if they crash in the market and, it's a bubble and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, they haven't even purchased enough yet to cause that sort of crash. So if you're telling me that you think treasury companies are going to blow up and crash the market, you're actually like a huge bull for treasury companies because you're assuming they have to get enough coins first. So you're actually saying they buy 10 times more coins and then there's a problem.
Yeah, I think the total number outside of Strategy now is Strategy has 6,200, and the number outside of it is only 300,000. And so, it's plenty of room to go. But obviously, it's getting more expensive to acquire Bitcoin as well, right? So I think some of these numbers, it's going to be harder to push them up, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, nominally, it'll be harder to kind of get the coin count. We've obviously wanted to get our cash deployed as soon as possible as a result of that. But I really am a true believer that we're relatively early in the trend. And, my conversations with people on Wall Street have echoed that.
I was just a quick remark, but I was on the Roxham TV with Nolan Bowerly this morning, and I was saying, when I look at the Bitcoin Treasury space, I'm reminded of there's an early Bitcoin Talk post. Maybe you remember this, Stephen, but it's essentially the Bitcoin rich list. So it's from 2013. They find all the accounts with more than 50,000 Bitcoin, and there's a few comments that are essentially like, these are the future richest people in the world, and people are laughing, and they're making sort of little jokes, and then 15 years later. That's true. Me and you know some of the richest people in the world, who are the richest people in the world because they own Bitcoin. Yeah. And so with the Bitcoin Treasury companies, it feels similar, right? It's like, people say Strategy is going to become, the biggest company in the world. These will be the biggest companies in the world. And it's like, ha, 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 write it off. But, this trend sticks around and Bitcoin becomes the money. It becomes the hurdle rate. It becomes the way that, not only companies, are denominating their success, but how investors are judging them, right? That's the 10-year narrative, I think. So I agree with you. It's early.
100%. And, one of the ways I like to think and talk about treasury companies is they are a novel structure for integrating Bitcoin into securities markets. And so people have their hesitations and their thoughts, but at the end of the day, if you think that Bitcoin takes over everything, if you think that Bitcoin becomes ubiquitous, securities markets are part of everything. I can't personally think of a adoption pathway for Bitcoin reaching global scale that does not involve passing through the heart of financial markets, right? It kind of has to. And I think that treasury companies are doing some early work on how does Bitcoin fit it? What does a Bitcoin preferred look like? What does a Bitcoin bond look like? Which is different. And Pierre Richard's working on this. It's actually quite interesting if you've never heard him describe it. It's very different. And so on. And what do equities look like that focus on Bitcoin? And my base case is that most of the products that will be invented haven't been invented yet. That, we've seen a few preferreds and we've seen these things, but there's a huge landscape for product creation that are Bitcoin linked, Bitcoin denominated, or in some ways based on Bitcoin. And that's what these companies are going to do. They're going to explore the securities landscape.
Keep going, Rizzo. You're doing great.
Me? What can I add? We're early, right?
Yeah, we're early. Stephen, what themes have you seen in your conversations over the past few weeks? I'm sure you're talking, right? Having lots of meetings, lots of discussions. I guess you in some way already hit on kind of framing if someone has a concern about everything crashing and burning, but it's not even built up enough to do that yet based on what we just saw. Are there any other concerns, misconceptions, or is it really around on the education piece? Is it educating people on Bitcoin itself, or on the corporate adoption of Bitcoin? Is it both, or one over another, or how does everything stack up from a themes perspective, I guess?
So here's something that's really interesting. So I've talked to a material number of investment banks and analysts, and I would actually say that here's a few key takeaways. Most of the analysts, I think actually all the ones I talked to, and maybe that's a survivorship bias because they're the people that talk to me, but like everyone I talk to likes the concept, likes the category, thinks it makes sense. And so I had an interesting conversation, I think last week, with an analyst from like a very well-known investment bank, like a little bit below the bulge bracket, but close. And it was really interesting hearing him say this. I think this will be interesting to people on Twitter. He said, it's obvious that these companies trade at a premium because they are delivering a growth rate, because they are delivering Bitcoin per share growth. And that's how finance works. There's actually a way that I think Bitcoin treasuries make more sense to people in finance than Bitcoin did. Because Bitcoin, you can't really value. It doesn't have cash flows. Like, it's hard to do a valuation model that fits into that paradigm. But Bitcoin treasury companies are actually, I think, are more understandable. They have a rate. They have something they're trying to achieve, and you can measure how fast they're achieving it, and you can measure their liabilities and their assets. And so it actually makes a ton of sense to people in finance. And the concept of these companies trading at a premium is very natural to them because they're used to something called a PE multiple, and that companies trade based on their future value, not just today value. So anything that's growing gets valued at a premium effectively. And so a lot of these analysts basically said this is exciting. I've heard it called miners 2.0, which from their perspective makes sense because the miners were the companies that really tapped capital markets, that did ATMs, that raised debt, that did all these things. And so they're kind of they have a little bit of experience with this. And it makes sense to them, and it's exciting. But the other takeaway is not just that. So that's saying that the high level concept, the narrative, the strategy, it clicks for people on Wall Street. They get it. They think it makes sense. But also what they've told me is that most people don't yet understand it. So a lot of these analysts, when they're going on to, the other departments and these banks, they're not up to speed at all. They don't even know who MicroStrategy is. They have no idea who Metaplanet is. They are not really dialed in here. And that to me also tells us that we're relatively early, that it's not, we're not at this like Wall Street FOMO, launch a million pipes. It's actually still relatively, contained. But in some ways it's analyst led, that these people are diving in first, which is a good sign in many ways.
What surprised you the most from your first day at Nakamoto to today? Biggest learning, biggest takeaway, biggest surprise. You can just pick one, wherever you want to go.
So my biggest surprise is actually very shortly after I announced that I was joining, or we announced that I was joining. And, it went out there, and I probably talked to 50 to 80 well-known Bitcoiners. And by well-known, I generally mean they work in the industry in some capacity or have done something professionally. And so I had a lot of conversations. I was shocked at, I was expecting at that stage, like this was kind of at the top of the last wave, the last push higher, the smarter web and H100 and Metaplanet really going on a run, and prices were up, and it seemed like people that were watching the industry, if they had participated in those smaller names, like had done really well and made a ton of money. And so I kind of expected that a lot of the people I talked to would be like, oh yeah, these are really interesting. I own some. I have 5% in treasury companies. But it was the opposite. It was actually that almost everybody was hesitant. They were like, I mean, I'm happy for you, Stephen, but like, are you sure? Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? It was a on a category basis or on a kind of like, well, what do you think about the high level idea? There were a lot of hesitations. And I think there were very few people that were like, 2 feet, I'm in, this is great. Like, this makes total sense. And that surprised me. I thought we were further along. And that's one reason I kept revising my estimate. Actually, we're at the beginning of this, because even the people that are closest, like Bitcoiners are patient zero for understanding Bitcoin Treasury companies, because they already understand Bitcoin. They're already aware of MicroStrategy. And so it's the smallest leap for a Bitcoiner to be on board and understand what's going on here. And I started thinking to myself that, well, if even these people are not fully on board, if even the Bitcoiners are still wrapping their heads around this and they're still figuring it out, like this has not gone very far at all, which is exciting. So I know I've kind of made that point already on this talk, but it was that was the thing that surprised me the most.
Yeah, I would add something that you maybe a different class of participant that you didn't mention that I think is interesting and indicative, though, is the crypto general folks also sort of view the kind of structure of the treasury company as sort of like a loophole, right? And I think like their reaction is very interesting, because they sort of say like, oh, market structure is coming. And then once market structure comes, the capital markets will then move on to kind of the more exotic parts of the asset class. But I think for the reasons that you explained, Stephen, it's like, well, who's to say that that's the case? That's sort of an assumption that a lot of people are making, but it's like, I don't know that that's actually true. And then even with market structure passing, right, it's like best case scenario we've heard November, maybe that's gets pushed into next year, maybe that gets politicized. So I don't know, there's this idea that it's almost like the treasury company vehicle is a loophole. Yeah. The crypto people who are doing these digital asset companies now are sort of in their heads, like, we just saw Solana is launching one, Arthur Hayes jumping on board. They are exploiting this loophole, right? But they don't understand the vision of Bitcoin being sort of the hurdle rate in capital markets, or they're not articulating that. So I think that there's a lot of people with that impression. So I was wondering if you've noticed that as well.
Absolutely. So that was actually, the kind of second point in my view where I kind of got how I would explain why I think we're early is for so long, I was watching like the crypto people. And they were just totally unaware of this Bitcoin Treasury thing. And like, if this thing was really the speculative wave, I thought, these guys are going to be involved. If these guys haven't gotten involved yet, it hasn't gone any further. And for so long, there was zero discussion. And then right at kind of the like local top of that last push, I saw a few of these larger accounts start tweeting about, hey, treasury companies. And then that's when you saw like
digital asset treasuries.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, these assets don't make sense as a treasury asset. There's a ton of flaws with that. Even the deals themselves are structured differently. The BitMEX research did something this morning on the kind of embedded terms in a lot of these crypto treasury companies that of course are, anyways, you can read the research for yourself, but they're very different. I really doubt there's going to be a long tail of these plays going out the risk curve and finding any sort of product market fit. Like, I think Bitcoin treasury companies will work and will succeed, and there's going to be whatever game played there. But by and large, yeah, I'd agree. Like, the crypto sort of trading universe was not participating in the growth of Bitcoin treasury companies over the last little while.
Yeah, and I'd say even if not neutral, I think they were outright dismissive, right? Pierre Richard had a good tweet earlier this week where he was talking about, the narrative shift from Vitalik Buterin and saying, okay, like the treasury companies are bad and like, they're anti-ethos, right? They were viewed as sort of anti the crypto ethos, which was sort of, fighting governments and sort of, bringing freedom to people, right? And then it was like, oh, now we're all doing it and raising as much money as possible now that it's worked. But yeah, I think you're right. The question that I end up is, how do these not be, especially on the digital asset side, it's like, these are just hedge funds right now. You own multiple digital assets. You're just a publicly traded hedge fund that has an equity at that point. It gets confusing, but it'll be interesting to see if that's where the bubble is this cycle. Yeah.
Sure. And I think to your point, I've actually never seen greater bewilderment around MicroStrategy than from crypto people. I have seen these tweets from crypto people of just like they cannot wrap their head around MicroStrategy. And I think the breakdown is that I think they are financial nihilists in many ways. So I think there's at least a current that runs through the crypto universe that is very nihilist.
You're gonna have to explain that for me. What is financial?
Like that the entirety of the financial system is meaningless. It is an arbitrary constructed scam. Like it's just the same way that like people extract value from coins. That's the whole stock market. It's just everyone playing value extraction games. And that there's nothing positive sum. There's nothing real or substantial or what have you. And so they intrinsically view MicroStrategy as that. They just view it as a nonsense, speculative. There's no reason to justify it. There's no purpose there. And I mean, I have a minor degree of sympathy because I know it's not an intuitive concept to many people. I understand why they have a hard time wrapping their head around why what MicroStrategy is doing is so valuable, but they take it quite far, and they struggle to understand how these companies integrate into the financial system in a value in a value add way, in a positive sum way.
Yeah, I think the question to them though is like, how do they grade the success of the companies, right? What's the benchmark? And that goes back to like, what's the hurdle rate? Is it dollars or Bitcoin, right? I think the Bitcoin Treasury companies have a clear answer to that, whereas the digital asset companies don't.
Totally. And something I like about Bitcoin Treasury companies, right? If you're a Bitcoin bull and you think that eventually Bitcoin becomes this global monetary base asset or something similar to that, eventually someone in the market has to start thinking about a Bitcoin denominated return, right? If nobody can generate a Bitcoin denominated return, you have a challenge of Bitcoin as some sort of base layer asset or valuable collateral. And so one of the things I like about Bitcoin Treasury companies is they're one of the few parties in the market that is actually saying, hey, we're going to generate a Bitcoin denominated return. It's not about a dollar denominated return. We're going to engage in economic and financial activity to deliver a return on top of Bitcoin. And while that is in most cases primarily through financial markets, I think it's just crucial that someone somewhere is doing that. And as everything evolves, there'll be more ways to do that. There'll be more ways to generate that return. But like someone in the market needs to be thinking in this way.
Well, I think that's what people struggle to grasp, right? Like the people struggle to grasp that there would be, a Bitcoin return rate that was higher than Bitcoin, even the Bitcoin maximalist, right? I think that's the biggest Bitcoin maximalist struggle, is that, there should be company. Well, I was talking about American HODL about this at the, we did a conference last week in Portland. Oh, I lost my camera. But I was saying basically, what are companies, right? Companies are just groups of people that try to outperform the cost of holding money, right? The reason that you invest in equity is to invest in the people. And I like how Bitcoin, really fractures these concepts, right? You have to go back to first principles.
You have a real problem if your money the rate of return on your money cannot be exceeded. That actually is a problem, right? And like part of that is because Bitcoin is very early here. It won't always forever be perpetually growing at, as much as it has been, right? So eventually that kind of growth rate slows down a bit. It becomes easier to outperform it. But like you do have a challenge, right? And so it's understandable that it's very, very, very hard to outperform Bitcoin currently. And that's why these companies are not engaged in like foundational economic activity in most cases. They are engaged in creating financial structures that are designed to perform a Bitcoin denominated return, which I think is the most rational. Like, it's a lot harder to do that with a product or a service at this stage in Bitcoin's growth. Eventually, you obviously will be able to do it.
Do you think that lends to the idea that I've at least had of if a Bitcoin treasury company is going to have operations, and let's say you're starting from scratch and you can but you need or want an operational sort of business, maybe that should be digital first, Bitcoin native if possible. Do those ideas, putting your just individual hat on, just generally, make sense over some more complicated or real world business, or are there pros and cons to both?
I think your best case scenario is having a business that synergizes with the Bitcoin Treasury. So, for example, if you can have a business that as your Bitcoin Treasury grows, your revenue grows along with the value of the Bitcoin. That's your best case scenario, right? That is, you need to tie the two together. You need a way to generate a return stream that is commensurate with the growth of the Bitcoin. That's obviously that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but that is your best case scenario. And so I think if you can get that, that's what you want now. But also that's what these companies are going to need to back into at some point in the future. That might be 5 or 10 years. I'm not saying that's around the corner, but eventually as this, you can think of it right now as this is the race. This is we're in a race. And right now the growth of Bitcoin, it outpaces everything else. So your most rational strategy is to raise capital and buy Bitcoin. It's kind of going in reverse order. But at the end of that, there is going to be this process where that race is more saturated, the growth rate starts to slow, or the ability to deploy capital becomes reduced. And then the winners are going to be, I would expect, the companies that can say, hey, we're sitting on 300,000 Bitcoin, 600,000 Bitcoin, 1 million Bitcoin, whatever it is. And we now have a operating business that uses that Bitcoin in some capacity to generate a return. And again, this isn't me saying right now, but this is saying the long run. Maybe that's 5 to 10 years out there. But it seems to me like that would be where this ends up. Alternatively, I could see some of these companies basically getting acquired by operating companies that need a Bitcoin treasury for a foundational purpose, right? So let's say this goes on for a number of years and there's many Bitcoin treasury companies with different amounts of coins. And then let's say an investment bank or some other financial services company says, hey, we want to issue Bitcoin denominated financial products. We want to issue securities and option strategies and other things, or we want to settle international trade. We want to be a correspondent bank that is facilitating high-level international trade. And the normal banks aren't really set up to touch Bitcoin directly. They need a correspondent bank to settle it. So we want to be the financial institution that does this. In order to do so, we actually need Bitcoin collateral. We can't perform our business function unless we have Bitcoin collateral. And so they acquire one of the treasury companies that has 100,000 coins or whatever it is, right? And I could see that as some eventual, again, for people listening, I'm talking out in the future, but I think we're in a race right now, but eventually these become functional financial institutions that integrate into the economy.
Got it. We have Ed Julien with us. Ed, how's it going backstage?
Hey, good. I keep on getting triggered here, and I want to chime in.
Yeah.
But hey, Stephen, I wanted to hear your opinion on something at 2 a.m. last night when I was freaking out about not waking up in time for this. I had a thought in my head, and what you do at 2 a.m. is you just start talking to ChatGPT, right? Because nobody else wants to talk to you. So I asked the question because I'm always thinking 20, 30, 50 years in the future as to, where is this going?
Sure.
If Strategy owns 1 million Bitcoin, what does that mean? And it's just so hard to get your head around what could go wrong, right? And so I got into it with ChatGPT and I said, hey, who were some endless corporate treasury companies in the past that, they said, wow, this will never end. And I'll just read them off to you real quick. But the East India Company in the 1600s, 1700s, they had billions of dollars, gold, silver, etc. corruption, overextension, assets nationalized, right? Nokia in the 90s and the 20-aughts, 20 billion in treasury, and they missed the smartphone transition, and they had to sell off their phone business to Nokia. General Motors in the 2000s, 25 billion in cash reserves, and they just had too many legacy costs with pensions. They burned through their reserves, filed for bankruptcy. Yahoo, billions in cash investments. They failed their pivots, leadership churn, and sold the business to Verizon for 4.5 billion, and then finally Enron in the 90s and up until 2001, 70 billion in treasury, but fraudulent accounting off balance sheet, and the treasury was wiped out overnight.
Yeah.
And great. Thank you, ChatGPT. You gave me the answers I was looking for, but where does this go wrong? It's like, it's always that, well, what happens if Bitcoin collapses? And we're like, no, that can't happen. So
the thing that jumps out to me about those companies is they obviously had extensive liabilities and operating structures and things that they had to do, right? It wasn't that the treasury collapsed on its own. It's that these were primarily operating businesses that accumulated great wealth in most cases. And so there's obviously that's the other side to what I was just saying of it's why miners didn't become treasury companies and weren't treated as treasury companies, because a miner has continuous high level ongoing CapEx spending that competes with the treasury acquisition function, right? This is the main reason miners why your company, why MicroStrategy was able to focus on primarily being a treasury company. And the market thought that was more valuable than a high-level operating business with very extensive capital needs. And so I think the difference between the companies you've talked about, assuming nothing happens to Bitcoin and there's not, XYZ, but is that the treasury didn't synergize with the operating business outside of just the synergies of having a tremendous amount of capital, and that's relatively helpful. I think for treasury companies, because the market is rewarding the acquisition function, now it's saying, we don't know what the future looks like, but we know that it will be valuable to have 1 million Bitcoin or 500,000 Bitcoin or 100,000
or 20 Bitcoin.
Or 20 Bitcoin. We know that that's valuable. Our degree of conviction, our degree of confidence that having 100,000 Bitcoin will be valuable in the future is much greater than our degree of confidence in it's this operating business or it's that operating business, or this is the winner, right? So the market has clearly rewarded that. Nevertheless, I think the best case scenario down the road is that there is a synergy between the treasury and the business, right? And so it's about these are the companies, I think, that highest probability they become the Bitcoin financial institutions, they become the Bitcoin banks, they become the what have you. As we enter a market and a financial system that needs Bitcoin, that needs large counterparties holding Bitcoin. Strategy has been the first example of this because, for example, you issued a novel financial product, the preferreds, that you couldn't issue unless there was a large counterparty holding huge directional risk. You needed a counterparty that says, hey, we'll take the directional risk on 600,000 coins, and then we'll use that to issue a novel security, to issue the preferred. And my view, my base case is just that we're at the beginning of that, and there will be many, many more of these ideas, probably many of them coming from you guys. And so I thank you for that. But it's that synergy. It's about that we're eventually getting to a world where the financial system requires Bitcoin collateral.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking too. If you look at the bottom of the list, right, they're essentially creating, I think, a golden parachute, right? If a zombie company or a company losing money has all this Bitcoin, well, then they can start selling it off in order to cover losses for a while, and their MNAV will go below 1. They won't be able to raise more money to buy more Bitcoin. Fine. Yeah. Is it a disaster? No. I mean, they'll be able to get acquired or something else before they go bankrupt, right? So it's kind of it's bankruptcy insurance maybe for the bottom half of the list. That parachute basically that saves them. The top of the list, which just fascinates me, because
Yeah.
you know when you have that much of a treasury in the most pristine asset ever,
Sure.
you found the fountain of youth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it speaks to the thing the market wants right now is Bitcoin acquisitions. It's a growing Bitcoin machine. That's the thing it values, because that's the stage of the market we're at currently. And so, yeah, like, you know, if these companies start losing Bitcoin, or specifically like Bitcoin per share starts going down, then yeah, I mean, why there's not a premium, there's not a growth rate anymore. The market is paying a premium for a growth rate.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to now I got to go back to GPT and explore that. It's like when the Spaniards discovered the New World, and there's all these resources, endless resources, right? But yeah, fascinating. Well, Tim, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks for hopping on, Ed. Great to chat.
All right, Ed, thank you. See you in a second. Stephen, where can people find you and Nakamoto and anything else online? And thanks for your time today.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure to come on. Thanks for inviting me. So you can obviously find me on Twitter, on X. So just Stephen Lubka, look me up. My profile will come up. DMs are always open, very active there. Nakamoto, nakamoto.com. There'll be a lot more information coming soon. And you can obviously also follow David Bailey and Tyler Evans, who were the kind of co-founders and kind of ran the UTXO strategy that resulted in many of the top treasury companies, right? I mean, this is funny. I'm just going to shout this out now because it's funny to me how often I see this, but so many people don't know that David and Tyler were behind Metaplanet, were behind Smarter Web, were behind Blockchain Group, like these companies, which are very well liked by many people in the community. Like, it was the UTXO team that did those, or did them, at least was instrumental in doing them. And that's the same team at Nakamoto. It's in many ways why we're doing Nakamoto, is because we wanted to take the strategy that they had executed successfully and take it to the next level with more capital and more scale. So, you know, shouting out there that like people don't always make that connection. And, you know, our goal with Nakamoto, we have many goals, but one of them is just really executing the UTXO strategy and launching first movers in international capital markets that do not currently have a treasury company. And I think one of the cleanest theses you can have for this development is that every major capital market has room for at least one treasury company. That's a pretty clean bet. And it's because so much of the capital in those countries cannot freely purchase Bitcoin or US securities. And so you create you widen the on-ramp, or you expand its net positive to the amount of dollars that can buy Bitcoin. So anyways, that's our thesis, and always happy to talk more.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting when you go around the world and you realize how many markets don't even have Bitcoin ETFs, or even very many exchanges. So, Stephen, thank you. And we really look forward to following along, and we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, Tim. See you guys.
Take care. Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp leads this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of one institution or complex private keys, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated, cold storage, multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent, institutional-grade custodians. No single custodian can move funds by themselves, providing an unprecedented level of security that traditional custody solutions simply can't match. Protected by a $100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, all transactions are fully auditable on-chain, never rehypothecated, and executed only at your explicit direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp delivers comprehensive Bitcoin financial services, including lending, trading, inheritance planning, IRAs, and more. OnRamp functions as your private banking partner, coordinating key holder activity, removing technical burdens, and providing a personalized, trust-minimized experience tailored to your specific wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps secure generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. Visit onrampbitcoin.com today to learn more, sign up, or book a free consultation with their team of Bitcoin custody experts. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Stampseed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15. Join us at the Wynn in Las Vegas, February 23rd through the 26th, 2026, for Bitcoin for Corporations. Use code KOTZ when you grab your tickets at strategy.com, and we'll see you there. This episode is brought to you by Arch Lending, the premier provider of crypto-backed loans designed for both individual and institutional investors. At Arch, your digital assets work for you without selling them. Arch offers flexible loan options tailored to your needs. Backed by industry leaders like Morgan Creek Digital, Castle Island Ventures, and Galaxy Ventures, Arch Lending is setting a new standard in crypto-backed lending. Are you ready to unlock the potential of your crypto assets? Visit archlending.com to learn more and configure your loan today. Are you looking for comprehensive analytics on corporate Bitcoin adoption? Strategy Tracker delivers real-time insights into how companies are executing their Bitcoin strategies completely free. Monitor NAV premiums, cost basis performance, and track how corporate Bitcoin Treasuries perform against the market. Upgrade to Premium for just $3.99 a month and unlock exclusive benefits like detailed market rankings, real-time trading volume analysis, and advanced performance metrics for corporations embracing Bitcoin. Apply code KOTZ at checkout for 100% off your first month of Premium. Strategy Tracker is your essential tool for measuring the effectiveness of corporate Bitcoin strategies. Visit strategytracker.com and gain the analytical edge in understanding the Bitcoin Treasury phenomenon.